What is up, my ninjas? I'm Strydent, and welcome to my review of Masters of the Universe. Um, I am. It feels kind of good, actually. Let me start out by saying it feels kind of good to get back to doing some reviews, and I have a lot of superhero films that I kind of skipped, so I think I will kind of jump back into superhero film attack and try to give you some superhero movie reviews. Um, as well as some. I'm going to do some art videos as well, but this is going to be a review. I've watched and listened to a lot of the discourse of surrounding this film, and I feel like it's getting a very bad rap. Like a lot of what people are bitching about are not the things that, how do I put this? They're not all issues. You know what I mean? There are things that are issues, don't get me wrong, because there is some modern Hollywood thrown in. And that's always fucking annoying. But the modern Hollywood stuff is intertwined with some actual counter modern Hollywood, modern, California politics that makes it feel more like exactly what He Man always was. I don't think that a lot of the reporting has been fair. It's been pretty biased because of what I'm talking about right here. And I think there are a lot of reviews and a lot of discourse that misses the fact that this movie does it does a lot of one and a little of the other, So it hits the modern audience talking points without being overt, but then it hits the old school manliness stuff really well without beating you over the head to make those other points feel I don't know, less valid, or to make those folks feel uncomfortable. But I'm going to get into it. Consider this a revisiting of superhero film attack. There's a lot of superhero films that I didn't really talk about. Some of them aren't worth it, but there's going to be a few that I will get into and I will talk about because I haven't really been doing movie reviews all this time. So I feel like with the way that my reviews have been, when I talk about a generic popular franchise, or well-known popular franchise, everybody goes to see it. When I talk about something that's less, um, famous, nobody watches my version. You go and you watch everybody else's, and they leave out all the information that's valid for the particular franchise. But I do thank you for the awesome uh, reception for my Mondo He-Man review, and also for my Bulletproof review from Fresh Monkey Fiction. Um, I was in a funk and I was feeling like I'm gonna not do them. That's why I didn't do my most fun and most unfun of last year, um, which normally would be out, but it would have been out by now. Um, I was getting ready to completely quit YouTube. So to see that I was inspired to do that because that figure is perfect. People say there's no such thing as a perfect figure, but that He-Man is the best domestic He-Man figure we've ever received, hands down. Period. No contest. Story over. And I had to, being a big fan of Motu, I absolutely had to show some love to that figure, and I'm glad it went over with you guys. Same with Bulletproof. I'm a huge Cops fan. You know this. I was interested in trying to bring it back. It didn't quite work out, but Cops did end up coming back in a small way, and then also it inspired my line, SWAT 2249. So there's that. So I'm glad that you guys dug that, and as long as you guys will rock with me, get the last video, the one I did of what was the last video about? It was Off Our Brains, the last Off Our Brains. Get that up there. Get the likes up there. Get the views up there. Get it up there. It needs to get up in the thousands because there's 10,000 of you subscribed to this channel. So share it, do all the good stuff, and without further ado, let's jump into this. So He-Man was directed by Travis Knight. When I heard Travis Knight was the director that finally got the Masters of the Universe film, I was like, okay, it's in good hands because Travis Knight don't miss. He don't miss. Kubo was dope. Paranorman was dope. Fucking Box Trolls was dope. Bumblebee was beyond dope. It's like Bumblebee, especially because it was an '80s property, and he was able to make everything recognizable. It still had some of the DNA of the Bayformer stuff as far as technical aspects of the visuals, but overall, it was 100% something that could have been an episode of the old G1 cartoon. I loved it. It made sense. I'm not down with all the bullshit criticism that some people had. It was a good movie in and of its, in and of itself, and that's what this stuff needs to be. None of these, as films, are gonna blow you away and change your whole everything, but they do represent some certain things, and I think he understands that. He's the first director in all 40 years of my life, well, 47 years of my life, that has said they were a fan, and then their work actually, reflects that. So when they said he was the one to finally get it, I was happy about that. Now before him, there were several drafts done. There was one done by a duo. It was two brothers. They were going to do the special effects, and they had wrote the treatment. But something about what they were doing or planning to do didn't work. Um, David Goyer also wrote a treatment, and people said it was on par with. I want to say where the brothers might have been the two brothers behind Skyline, the franchise Skyline, which they're kind of like they're B movies in as far as substance goes, but the special effects are insane. And from what I hear, the two of them are special effects wizards, and they did the special effects on their laptop. So whatever you feel about that, the end result of the film doesn't look like it's a cheapo. It's not essentially a YouTube film. But David Goyer wrote a treatment in his version. They said the scale was on par with Lord of the Rings, which is awesome, and that was back in the earlier mid 2000s or the early 2010s. Um, and that's good because the 2002 series ended in '04, and I think it ended in '04, and it had a grand scale. And Motu in general, depending on where you take your inspiration, it is a pretty grandiose property. It has crazy lore, especially the stuff that came with the 2002 reboot. They took everything from across the series and plugged it all in a way that made it fit. It was the same thing that was done with Thundercats. So I have a feeling that that would have been good. I don't think Goyer was alone, but I know he was like the 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 idea person who also wrote a draft of this initial film. But Noah Centino, who now is playing Ken Masters in Street Fighter that's coming out soon, he was set to play He-Man. He bowed out of it, and then they had trouble finding someone to fill the boots of Prince Adam and He-Man. And then, kind of like as things came together, Nicholas Galazine came on board, and his name is pronounced Nicholas Galazine, like magazine, Galazine. He said this himself. I don't know what it is about all of you guys out there not listening to the people who are making these films speak. Like for the longest time, it used to irk me when they do that with Gal Gadot. Or Gal Gadot. I'm sorry. Everyone would say Gal Gadot. I'm like, she's not French. I mean, granted, she's kind of, I don't know, she's involved in all kinds of stuff that I guess if you're super political, you don't give a fuck about, saying her name correctly or being nice to her. But I'm not political. I like movies. The actors have been doing their thing in a lot of these action films and superhero films. So we owe them at least a little bit of respect in getting their names correct. But Nicholas Galazine ended up filling the shoes of He-Man. While he is smaller than Noah Centino, he did bulk up considerably to play the role. Now, many people said he's too small. I kind of agree. He is much smaller than Dolph Lundgren, who was, I want to say, around the same age when he played He-Man in the '80s. but Dolph was the kind of guy you need to look for, like the one in a million, way tall. Like this dude was nearly 7 feet tall, fucking 300 pounds of muscle. Dude looked like a male model. Like it's He-Man. You know what I'm saying? Like that's who you get to play He-Man. Nicholas Galizian looks like the next best thing. You know, if you couldn't get another Dolph Lundgren, then you get Nicholas Galizian, and he does a good job embodying the two parts. More so the one part because the movie treats He-Man as a power set and a little bit less like a separate person. But by the end of it, he's acting like He-Man when he transforms. By the final fight. But anyway, Nicholas Galizian does a great job. Anyway, he was the one to take over for Noah Centino. Um, uh, Camilla, what was her last name? Is it Mendez? That's my grandmother's last name as well. I think her last name is Mendez. I'm gonna look it up just to make sure. I want to make sure I'm not giving you the wrong information. Masters of the Universe cast Camila Mendez. Yeah, and it's spelled exactly the same way as my grandma's last name, which is crazy. You got two Brazilian ladies in this, so represent, represent. Anyway, she plays Tila. She looks the part. What I want to say when it comes to this is my own general piece about the casting. Everybody feels small. Everybody, with the exception of Goatman. Everybody feels small. When I look at Motu, especially now with like the Chronicles and the even going further back, the classics, and then the Motu Jesus, what is that line called? Masterverse. Those figures are much larger than like Marvel Legends and Movie Masters of any line. You know, any movie related figures, they're bigger. They're a little bigger than McFarlane figures, and it works because they're all barbarians, they're all muscles and all that shit, you know. And even the girls, those girls are thicker and more muscular than the women that you normally see in your Marvel Legends and whatnot. And I feel like in many of their cases, you should have had like He-Man could have been a combination of he could have been a combination of a suit, like a prosthetic suit, much like what they ended up doing with Skeletor, or how they did with both of them in those commercials. There was like a series of commercials from several years back where He-Man and Skeletor were like dancing to the Dirty Dancing soundtrack main song. Was it The Time of My Life or whatever? And it was a really kind of fruity commercial, but it was funny, you know, and it was played straight for the most part. Like you're supposed to believe that that's actually them, you know, and they look the part. I mean, like the guy in the video in that trailer or commercial looked the He-Man actor looked exactly like the comic book art or the box art, and in many cases the figures for He-Man, but in real life. And he was wearing a fucking muscle suit on top of his muscles because you could tell he was already a big dude. They should have done that with this guy, with Galazine. And that would have given him the extra bulk. And then you use your CG to cover up any indication that it was a suit. And with, you know, all your actors and actresses that need to be physical, like Evelyn can stay skinny. She's fine. She does magic. But like Tila should have been more buff because there's no way that 96-pound, you know, Camila Mendez could kick Beast Man and he goes flying. You know what I'm saying? Like there's little things like that. I think there's a way that you could have bulked them up more to make them look like they could actually contend with the guys that they're fighting. Now, they didn't go ham. Like most of the actors are about the same size as Nicholas Galizian, or some of them are smaller than him. So He-Man does feel like the most formidable physical guy in the bunch. But, you know, he does also look like he has to hit some of these bad guys more than once. And the film does a good job of making the stakes feel like he can't just walk into the room and flatten everybody. You know what I mean? But anyway, Camila Mendez, Tila, she looks awesome. She does the job. She feels like in this realm, this version of things, she very much embodies the same spirit that Melissa Benoit uh, embodied as Tila in comparison to um, Buffy. What was her name? Was Buffy Sarah Michelle Gellar? Sarah Michelle Gellar felt very stiff and very like she's acting, whereas Melissa Benoit felt like she was Tila, you know. And the same goes for Camila Mendez. Even though she's small, she sells Tila as the master, fighter, the tough as nails chick that's, Man at Arms' daughter. And then like when you see Man at Arms in battle, you kind of get the feel for, you know, why she's so badass. And Idris Elba does a great job portraying Man at Arms. After a while, you forget that this is like an alternate take on Man at Arms in some ways. Um, Morena Baccarin. She does really good stuff as the sorceress. She looks the part, and she feels like she is the sorceress. You know what I mean? Like she feels like she is not just embodying, but like she just is. You know what I mean? Like you, from the first time you see her before she opens her mouth to say anything, she looks the part so much that the first time she speaks, it's like, yep, that's the sorceress. The way she speaks, the way she moves, the way she does, handles the magic, the way she transforms. It all feels so familiar that you kind of she loses herself in the role. She doesn't have a lot of dialogue, but she does show up in similar ways to the way the sorceress would. Allison Brie plays Evelyn. She's great. She's kind of goofy, but you can tell she's 100% evil, and she is enjoying being Skeletor's right hand person. Kristen Wiig is the voice of Roboto. In this one, Roboto is, has a female voice. Doesn't really change much about the character because she still delivers the lines in the deadpan kind of way that Roboto is typically written, and it works. James Purefoy plays King Randor, and Charlotte Riley plays Queen Marlena. James Purefoy is one of those Shakespearean guys that you always see in films that are like period films, and he kind of plays a lot of these roles where he's similar to Sean Bean, where he shows up and he either dies or he kind of just moves the plot on. Charlotte Riley, I'm not familiar with her at all, but she was fine as Queen Marlena, believable. She looked the part. It worked. And then we have Jared Leto as Skeletor, and Jared Leto steals the show almost 100% of the time. It was as if he put all the anger from the way people talk about him from other films into this role, and everything he did not do as the Joker, he did properly here. Um, I think he was perfect. He was perfect. I think it kind of shows again because a lot of people forget that even though he does some stupid stuff on set and he's a method actor and he may be a cult leader, he's a phenomenal actor, and he's given us enough performances where we should be able to see that he is a phenomenal actor. He just wasn't a good Joker, you know? Now, as far as the the story goes, once upon a time on Eternia, a young boy named Adam is lamenting the rules and the roles, the training and the things that a prince has to do to become strong enough to one day be king of the realm of Eternia. Um, he also has a very stern, tough father in King Randor who wants to see his son become that which, he has explained to Adam is what's necessary. He needs to be tough enough to deal with what's going on. So his father seemingly doesn't give him very much praise because Adam is small and meek, but he's goofy and people love him. And he kind of tries. He's being trained by Man at Arms. Man at Arms' daughter Tila is like Adam's best friend. One day, the castle and Castle Grayskull, Castle Eternos, which for those of you who don't know, Eternos is a realm or a kingdom. It's the capital of Eternia, which is the planet. There are tons of different masses, land masses on Eternia, but the bulk of the story takes place in the Eternos region. Um, Across from Castle Grayskull, I mean, from Castle Eternos is Castle Grayskull, and that's where the sorceress is Jesus. I'm just fucking up all the words and the names and everything, but anyway, that's where the sorceress resides. That's where essentially some of the magic that is all the magic actually that's associated with Eternia. It's They say Eternia is sitting in the heart of the universe, the center of the universe, and all the magic and everything flows through there. So it is kind of like a gateway, if you will, to magic and power and wisdom of everything. It's also where the mystical power sword is kept, and that power sword has turned, you know, regular fighters and really good fighters and heroes into super powerful champions when they're imbued with the power of Grayskull. Um, so one day, Eternos gets attacked, and it turns out that it's Skeletor, and Skeletor wants the throne, and he wants to dethrone Randor and just take everything over. The movie doesn't really do a good job explaining why. Skeletor just says he's evil and this is what he does. Now they don't make it clear if this is like a side effect of singular focus for a very long time, because judging by King Randor's hair, he is he's got brownish hair in the beginning with a few gray streaks, and then by the time you see him again later, he's old. But anyway, Skeletor in the comics, Skeletor wants to take over because he is Randor's half brother. I think King Miro had an affair with, well, not an affair, but he had a relationship with a Gar woman. Those are the blue skinned people of Eternia. And they broke up. And then he met the queen, who I think is also named Marlena. I can't remember. I've read some of these comics, but man, it's been a while. But this queen, that's who Randor's mother is. I think Randor was the one who took care of Keldor. That's Skeletor's real name. And Keldor, being the older one, should be the prince or the king. Once Miro, steps down. But because he's illegitimate and the queen is human, the human child takes precedence. And Skeletor resented this from a young age, so that evil, that resentment turned into evil, and then he started plotting to find ways that he could, get the throne. And then one thing led to several things led to other things. He became Skeletor. He started practicing dark magic, etc., etc., and he became the villain that we know now. But none of that is in this film. They don't go over that part. I don't know if they're saving that for something else, because there are big plans for more. But I don't know. But it's not in the movie. During this siege, you see Man at Arms do his thing. He's protecting the family, but he gets knocked down. Essentially, he gets cut down, and he starts to doubt himself. And this is what sends him on a downward spiral. He's unable to protect the king. The king gets kidnapped. Queen gets kidnapped, but not before she can get to Grayskull, get Adam to the sorceress, and the sorceress opens a portal to send him elsewhere, with the queen saying, "Send him to my home. They'll never find him there." Her home is Earth, because Queen Marlena was an astronaut who Flash Gordoned her way to Eternia, was found by Randor, and eventually became his wife. So before Skeletor could get a hold of him. The sorceress creates a portal, gives Adam the sword, tells him, that he needs to keep that safe and never lose, sight of it. Adam jumps through the portal just as Skeletor is coming, um, and he can't hold on to the sword. Sword flies somewhere else on Earth. Adam falls somewhere else on Earth. Cut to 15 years later. And then Adam is a dork working in HR. He is obsessed with Eternia. He's never forgotten anything from Eternia. He remembers all the people. He draws pictures of them. They're all over his walls in his room. But like life here sucks in comparison to what he grew up or what he was up to. I think he was 10 when that happened. Um, Life on Earth doesn't compare to life on Eternia for him. And he doesn't quite fit because he's obsessed with getting back to Eternia. So much so that he's going on dates and he's talking about this shit to people. Anyway, one day, a person calls him and says, I found your sword. Because Adam has been searching for the sword for the, better part of the 15 years that he's been on Earth. So he's buying up swords, but he often, the swords he buys are not the sword of power. Um, he gets back to the place where he gets to the place where this person tells him the sword is, and you see a statue of Vicor holding, or Vicron, it's one of the two of them, holding the power sword, and it's the actual power sword. So he pulls the sword out of his hands. It's kind of an awkward scene. Then he holds it up, thinking it's going to just automatically teleport him, and nothing happens. So he runs away, comes home, falls asleep, wakes up. The cops are at his door. As they're taking him to be processed, they're attacked by Beast Man. And Adam can't believe it, but he doesn't have time to really process what's going on. So he grabs the sword, tries to run. He gets attacked multiple times, but then he's saved by Teela. Teela helps him escape Beastman. They get to her ship and they fly back to Eternia, only to see that Eternia is in ruins. So it's bittersweet. He's happy to see his friend. He's happy as fuck to be going back to Eternia, but it's not really what he was hoping to come into contact with, because once he gets there, it's just a mess. And you find out that Skeletor has essentially just ransacked the place because he didn't really want the castle. He just wanted to make sure no one else was going to be able to have it. So they reunite with all of the masters, quote unquote, the champions of Eternia. They're now kind of like a resistance. And then they get attacked. And then during this attack, Adam steps up to try to talk down Trapjaw, and instead of being able to talk him down, he starts to get beat up. Then he decides to pick up the sword, and when he picks up the sword, he gets a flash from a psionic flash or a mental flash from the sorceress telling him what to say. So he holds it up, says the magic words, he's transformed, and it's funny because they do this thing where he wears these baggy shirts and stuff to hide how muscular Nicholas Galitzine has become to play this role. So they're trying to give you the impression that he's skinny. Sometimes when you see this guy, you see his back. His back is so wide. It's like, what are you guys doing? You know what I mean? Like, who are you fooling? Or if you see him standing next to Teela, his arm is the size of half of her body. So it's like, this dude, come on. So anyway, when he transforms, you do get to see him go from kind of regular sized man to like bulky master, He-Man muscles. Of course, there's always some type of distraction. I don't know if you guys can hear that ridiculous bass coming from somebody's car. Ay, ay, ay. At least it's not rattling the car like I've seen it a lot of times. But anyway, he beats the shit out of Trapjaw and all of his goons at that time. And then they escape from the base with the sword, and they form a try to come up with a plan. Um, Before they do that, they get when they come back to the when they came back to the resistance hideout. Adam is, when he's reunited with all these characters that don't remember him and don't believe that this is what, if this is Adam, this is what he would become. They just throw him in a holding cell, and in the holding cell is a bum, and everybody's just like, ugh, until when they try to leave when the base gets attacked, and Tila goes back and is like, we gotta get him. We can't leave him. She's trying to wake him up, and she says, "Dad." And he's like, "Why are you calling him Dad?" And then when they roll him over, it's like, holy shit, that's Duncan. It's Man at Arms, who, like I said earlier, has fallen from grace, both because the king got, the royal family got kidnapped, the castle got taken over, and he failed in his duty to protect them. So he kind of feels like he's taking full responsibility, but at the same time he's drowning himself in his sorrows because the one thing that he's supposed to be good at is the one thing that he failed at. So him and Tila do not have the greatest relationship. One thing leads to another. After their escape, um, there's like an air chase, like a sky chase, that leads to a crash, that leads to some downtime where the crew gets to talk about what's going on. They get to kind of come up with an idea of what they're going to do next, in which Skeletor appears via the 1986 or the 87 um, Masters of the Universe film, where he would address the people of Eternia in this giant, like, holographic projection, this magical projection. Um, and he essentially calls out He-Man, letting him know that he has his parents. So now Adam is in bloodthirst mode. He's like, I'm going to kill him and I'm going to get my parents back. And they're like, no, we don't do that. That's not the way to do it. And he's like, you don't understand. Like, now I'm learning that my parents are still alive and I could save them. And he's like, I'm going to save them. And Tila's trying to object. He's like, I got the power of a god in my hand. And she's like, but you're not a god. You're a human. You're a man. And he's just like, I'm going to get him. And that's what men do. And this is one of the things I'm going to go back over when I go over some of the things that I think were misinterpreted in this film. So anyway, there's a big battle at Snake Mountain. He-Man goes to Snake Mountain, fights everybody just about. He pretty much wins, but Skeletor reveals that his dad is right here. During the fight, He-Man does something that causes a portion of the castle to, Snake Mountain, to kind of crumble, and debris falls on his dad, killing him. Then Skeletor, of course, knocks him out, takes the sword, and imprisons him with the rest of the champions of Eternos. Skeletor keeps trying to use the sword, which I always imagined that not just anybody can pick up the sword and say the words. So, in Revelation, the fact that Skeletor was able to activate the power sword and then gain the abilities, of He-Man, he got all buffed up and stuff. I don't see that being a thing. I mean, it's cool that it happened in that, but I never imagined that would be a thing. I always imagined that if Skeletor was to use the powers, perhaps he would probably do some type of ancient spell, speak an ancient language that the sword would respond to, and then he'd be able to harness those powers. I could, I'm just using my imagination. I am a writer as well, and I think there's way more more engaging ways to get to the end result that they wanted than the way that they went about doing that. But, that's not the point of this. So anyway, while they're in the cell, Adam's reunited with his mother and Cringer, and then, he's talking to the rest of the guys there, and he peps, he has a speech, actually, not a speech, but a little dialogue with Duncan, about feelings and about what a man is supposed to do, you know, and what we have that strength for. And it kind of motivates Adam to try to motivate everybody else using the his strengths, you know, which are, you know, all are derived from working in HR for, you know, many years while on Earth. So he gets the team together, finds a way for them to break out. They break out. There's a weird like action sequence. You find out that Skeletor has gone to, you know, after trying to make the sword work and it failing miserably, he takes Evelyn to, well, he asks her that about a way to make it work. She recommends they go to Grayskull because there would have to be a way on Grayskull to make things work. So they go to Grayskull. Adam and his team fight off the bad guys. After they finished fighting the bad guys, right there, they decide to take their ships and go to Grayskull. Um, they go to Grayskull, confront, you know, everything. There's a huge fight scene. It's pretty cool to see everybody do everything. I'm amazed that I lived to see uh, Mechanic in real life, like in live action. Like that's another one of those things that I have to give props to Travis Knight for doing that I never thought I would see. Because Mechanic was the first Motu figure I ever had, and for a long time, he was my favorite. And then Fisto came along, and then he was my favorite, and I get to see both of them in live action. It's kind of nuts. There's a whole bunch of stuff that in recent years I just didn't think I would ever see, and here we are. You know, should I have a Gangbuster action figure? I never thought I would see Gangbuster in action figure form. Yet here we are. But anyway, big fight. Adam goes up against Skeletor, but before he's able to transform, Skeletor beats him, stabs him with the sword. Or I'm sorry, the sword breaks. Adam blocks some of Skeletor's, you know, like a shot from the Havoc staff, um, and which they don't call it the Havoc staff, as in it belongs to Havoc. They call it the Staff of Havoc in uh, this show, which almost sounds like it's a staff that can create havoc. I could be interpreting it wrong, but that's the way it sounds when they say it. Um, you know, like a weapon of destruction, not a weapon that belongs to destruction. But anyway, Adam goes to fight Skeletor and essentially gets his fucking clock cleaned. He gets murked super fast and pretty much is dying until a vision from the sorceress reminds him how things work. So then he wakes up, fights Skeletor, you know, and then you know, things go back to normal. Now, I'm purposefully leaving out some of the details because I want you guys to go see the movie. One of the problems that this movie is having is the Rotten Tomatoes and everything is showing that people are enjoying the movie, but the sales are saying something else. The sales are saying that the movie is not doing so well. I feel like the reporting on this film is bogus because how could the film have the word of mouth that it has and have nobody going to see it? That doesn't make any sense. Typically, the word of mouth is what gets people in seats. And so if there are people in seats to see this movie, then that means that the movie is doing, you know, what it's supposed to do correctly. So I don't see how, you know, it's not translating. But apparently it is translating to like low sales. So if that's the case, that sucks. It shouldn't be like that. But that's what we got. I thought the movie overall was dope. I love that the music was done by Daniel Pemberton with Brian May from Queen. Queen has always been my favorite rock group. Um, yes, I listen to all kinds of music, including rock. Um, the movie was expensive, but I don't think it was created to pull off the same. I don't think it was. How do I put this? I don't think the movie was positioned to bring in money for the studio the same way typical movies are. I think it was part of a strategy to reinvigorate, uh, He-Man in the public consciousness, so they could work on making He-Man a household name again across film, TV, toys, comics. He's been in comics for the last 2 decades consistently. Like his book didn't stop. Toys, same deal. We had the origins, we had the before the origins, you had the classics, which were a mail away series of figures. I think a subscription based um, series of figures, which I'm not keen on subscriptions. I think that's the worst that you can do. Don't do that. But we had those, and we had the Origins, which popped up a little bit later. Then we had Masterverse when Revelation came out. I loved Revelation. I hated it at first because what it seemed like they were doing was not my bag at all. It felt like we were about to be gypped, something fierce. Then you watch the whole thing and you realize what's really going on. And I commend them for what they were doing. It's a case of, let them cook, let them cook first before you try to, you know, completely diss them, you know. I'm not a huge Kevin Smith fan, but I think he and his team did the damn thing when it came to that series. Um, and the toys, say what you will about the show, but the toys were fucking phenomenal. I love my Masterverse collection. It literally gave me back what my 6 to 9 year old self couldn't get, because I couldn't find any of those characters when I was a little kid, and then I got older and I was able to find all that stuff, which makes me so happy because it always sucked back in the day to be a kid who wanted something that was popular only to not be able to find it simply because it's so popular that you just can't get a hold of it. And so now, because the classics got really expensive, which this fact, before I get back into, this movie, this fact is something that I want to make into a video and I want to have a discussion on, because I don't think that collectors realize how much they have fucked up the market. So Motu Classics, um, they were figures that were designed to, kind of bridge the gap, and it was part of a subscription service. But as usual, people were selling them on eBay. So if they're selling them on eBay, they should be selling them at the price per figure that they go for online, because it's brand new. Maybe a few dollars more, but it shouldn't be that a $40 figure, $35 figure is going for $300 and it just came out. So like there were tons of classics figures that were just priced ridiculously. And so there was no way that the average person would have been able to get those figures if they weren't part of, without breaking the bank a little. You wouldn't be able to get that shit unless you were in the subscription. And if you weren't in the subscription, like I said, you got to now be at the mercy of scalpers, and they were all scalpers. Every now and then you'd come across a like a figure that was priced, or a set that was priced properly, but typically they would price these figures at ridiculous price points. especially if it was someone that became popular over the years. Like Fisto, I told you, is one of my favorites. I had him when I was a kid. He was perhaps one of the only classics that I really wanted, like must get. And then they combined the designs of the classic Fisto with the 2000X Fisto, and the toy was going for $300. Mind you, he was 35 or $40 through the fucking subscription service, and he was going for $300 right after he dropped. So it's not a question of people not knowing the price. It's not a question of him being rare and hard to find and all the other things that apply to just about everything else. No, it was a question of greed. And so when Masterverse came about, every figure was peg warming because they were no longer using the bulbous muscular body that they had done for the last 40 years. Now they're using um, a new body, a new mold that looks more in line with the cartoon aesthetics. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want. That's the way it needs to be. And because I could actually get my hands on it, I was like, cool, man, this is what I want. I managed to get every single one that I wanted because of Masterverse. Makes me really happy. But we're going to talk about pricing and shit like that and how collectors are, they've been shooting themselves in the feet for a long time. We're going to talk about that later. But in the past, like I said, you know, He-Man, it was a household name in the 80s. And then, because many of us grew up, we would make references to He-Man, but the later generations don't really have the frame of reference. Some of them watched the 2002 series, but like he wasn't really in the place that he should be in, considering how many of us are still here and how many of us still like what the character embodies, and we enjoyed watching the shows. But I think that's what this movie was meant to do. It was meant to get him back into the public consciousness. And then from there, they can expand on this because now they have the look and the feel and the presentation. And now they can expand and do TV shows or streaming shows. And then they can do perhaps another animated series that looks more like the movie. So it's all unified. They could do more figures, which they're doing with the Chronicles and the Origin style first ones, I think they're called. Or there's first ones, and then there's the Origins versions of these characters, where they have the standard He-Man Buck, but he's wearing the gear from the movie, and everybody else is kind of sporting the designs from the movie. But the movie isn't doing very well. I think it had like a $200 million budget, but it only made back somewhere in the realm of $93 million as of, I want to say, last weekend. So I don't think that this movie, and judging from the things that I've read that Amazon and MGM are saying, they don't want this to be, and Mattel, they're not looking at this to be a like a Marvel Cinematic Universe that makes $1 billion per movie. They're looking at this to be the start of things. Commendable, it's fine. Um, I thought that the story was a decent story. It's simple, and I think that works because I'm no longer of the school that believes that the audience is so much smarter than they lead on. The average audience goer is not as smart as we have been led to believe, because if you look at what's going on in the world, it's clearly showing that the intelligence level is not there. They're not as smart as they lead you to believe, but it doesn't mean you insult their intelligence in your story. So this movie kind of does a good job of, simplifying things and presenting things without necessarily going back, like going into huge detail, so that everyone gets it. The costume design, characters, locations, even the fights, everything feels like Motu, like it's supposed to. It feels like they took the inspiration with the fights a lot from the 2002 series, where you have all these people walking around with axes and guns and swords and tomahawks and freaking clubs and shit. But in the original show, which the bulk of this story feels like that kind of that's the kind of tone that they're going with. Um, you have all these people with all these weapons, and they weren't fighting in the original show. They throw each other around, they block lasers or they cut a boulder in half or some shit, but they never really crossed weapons in a way that felt like there was danger when, a guy with a giant axe swings his axe at He-Man. They that was present in the 2002 series, which I think is the best remake, or at least one of the best reboots of all time. They took inspiration from that, and Revelation also, where people get hurt, people get punched, people get hit. The hits have consequences, that sort of thing. The tone is very much the Filmation tone. There's a lot of goofiness. There's a lot of like unseriousness in general. Like scenes that should be dead serious have an air of fun to them. So you don't feel that you're going to lose any of your favorite characters unless your favorite character is a goon. Because if he's one of, Skeletor's cronies, more than likely you're probably going to lose him. But as far as, the good guys go, they felt very much like, heroic and like they could do the things they were trying to do. But I enjoyed that part. I'm not a fan of the Filmation version of the show. Growing up, I always watched Thundercats over He-Man because even as a kid, I'm doing martial arts. I'm like, why does he have a sword if he's just gonna punch everybody in the face, or he's gonna pry open a door with the sword, but he's not gonna cut a spaceship out of like any of the flying vehicles. He's not gonna cut those things, or he would use the sword like a bat, but he wouldn't use the sword like a sword. And then there was like the constant reuse of animation. That's probably why I hate reuse in action figures. I grew up watching Speed Racer in Portuguese, Masters of the Universe in Portuguese, and some other shows in Portuguese as well, X-Men, stuff like that, like the Pride of the X-Men. And I hated when I watched like Speed Racer and Motu. Why the fuck did they reuse? I mean, I know now it's budget animation, but as a kid, I'm like, why did they just flip that? Why did like He-Man didn't walk over to the other side of the room? Why did they just show us the same thing twice with the first image flipped or reversed or whatever? I hated it. And all the running, they would just do this jog, this muscle man jog, and then the jump at leaping at each other only to be thrown. And then they do the little tuck and roll, and then they get up and they run back the other way because they reversed the. I hated that shit. And even now, trying to watch it, I think, the first season, and I can't watch it. I've tried to go get through it. It's painful to watch. It's painful to watch. It wasn't until the 2002 that I was able to sit through all the episodes, the full thing, and enjoy everything. The only thing I don't like about 2002 is that the music is very like subdued, and I think they need to. It'd be nice if they redid the music, maybe make it more in line with either Revelation and Revolution, or make it in line with the film, and then it would be awesome. Either of the films, they could take the music from either of them. But anyway, I think we're going to see more. It's just we're not going to see it necessarily in the same form that this came in, or they might, they might be trying to do something crazy where they put money behind their franchises despite the lack of name recognition in this current time period. Now, a lot of the criticism I have of the film, and I've heard some other people have it, is that they quote unquote DEI'd the film. They quote unquote wokeified the film. Now, there are little things, right? For instance, He-Man shows up almost naked, but none of the girls are even remotely close to wearing what they wear. They all got pants on. Put it like that. I'm like, so Nicholas Galazine could get, bulked up so that he can adhere to the quote unquote female gaze, but all the females couldn't get bulked up to adhere to the male gaze. What the fuck is that about? You know what I mean? Things like Adam being soft in general, which, the original filmation version, he was extremely soft, whereas the 2002 version, he was more um, adventurous. He just wasn't as strong or as big or intimidating as He-Man can be until he transforms. So they solve the problem in two different ways: make him smaller than everybody and nowhere near as strong when he's Adam, so he can get beat up every now and then, or he can get into a situation where he bites off more than he can chew, or you make him completely soft and just incapable of doing anything until he transforms into He-Man. They also made He-Man and Adam one personality until the final half of the film. Then they realized, okay, he would learn things, kind of like a Shazam kind of thing. He would develop wisdom because he has the wisdom of all the ancients, and he has all the power of like the Eternian gods and shit. The strength of the Eternian gods, and he should be smarter, and he should be trying to kind of hide that. They MCU'd him up in a sense because they took away the secret identity because everybody saw him transform. Everybody knows this. It's not just Man at Arms, Orko, and Cringer. It's everybody. So it's kind of weird that they chose to do that, and then they just kind of turned the other way to allow him to transform because he likes to do that. They also went a little further in making the names that all these characters have. For the most part, it's the good guys. Their names are names that 10-year-old Adam gave them, and then he tells them that's what he called them since he was 10. And they make jokes about it. They even make jokes about what he called himself when he transforms. The funny thing is, he would have come up with that name as an adult. So they're just saying Adam is a cornball, which we get, but the names that are supposed to be these characters' actual, like, this is how people know them, those names don't apply, which is kind of weird when you think about it, because it's almost like a mark of shame on this integral part of the character lore that you've turned into a joke because you, in 2026, have a problem with those names, not the people of Eternia. Because keep in mind, Eternia is not Earth. I didn't like that part. There are a lot of people who said things about how small Nicholas Galizian was, and I'm like, realistically, I don't think they had the time to Hugh Jackman him up. He was still pretty damn big, and I have a feeling that in the next one he will be twice the size he is here because he'll have however many years to train as opposed to months, because I think they only had like a year or 2 years to get this whole thing done, and it turned into a year and a couple months once they got things in place. Um, I think he looked the part. It's fine. If you light him a certain way, it accentuates how muscular he actually is, and I think it worked. You know, um, Now the things that I think that everybody missed is it's not just a like a blind commentary on you know toxic masculinity, because I remember when the film was announced, they said that um, Skeletor was going to represent toxic masculinity, and I'm like, stop using those words. That's a dumb thing. Any behavior becomes toxic in the hands of a toxic person, and the villain of every film would be considered a toxic person, female or male. They would be toxic. So they were using buzzwords to sell the movie to a modern audience when they should have just been straightforward. But there are lessons in the film, and Man at Arms gives a lot of these. A man protects, his family and his friends, and the things that he owns or whatever. He is to protect people, protect those who can't protect themselves, etc., because that's what's important, especially your family. Um, it showed in the beginning of the film, though, that before coming to Eternia, because Adam's life was so soft, there was nothing that was. You know how they say iron forges iron, or you know, pressure creates diamonds, or you know, fire. What do they say? Friction creates sharpness. He wasn't having any of that because he was working in HR. It was all soft. It was all therapy language. It's very reflective of the time. It's just soft. So he wasn't going through anything. So there was no room for him to actually rise to the occasion and become the tougher man, you know? Then there is the concept of how when you're strong and when you're fairly masculine, but when you're strong, in however way it manifests or it shows, you automatically command respect. I remember the first time I knocked someone out. Other people who used to talk shit got quiet because number one, they didn't even believe I could fight, and I'm like, that's cool because martial arts wasn't created for you to see that I could fight when you look at me. That's something that people started to do down the road. They started dressing a certain way. They started lifting weights to accentuate their musculature to make it look like they're some kind of athlete or something, when in reality you should just be a guy, a regular guy. And then when time comes for you to unleash those moves, you just unleash the moves and people don't suspect that you know how to do anything. But strength, it commands respect. You know, you shouldn't focus only on that. But if you are a worthwhile human being and you're strong, also, and I don't mean just physical strength. I mean you're strong of mind, strong of body, strong of moral conviction. That it impresses people, and it commands respect from the kind of people that you want that respect from. You know. Um, then there's the idea of balance. They show you that Adam is different from the other champions of Eternia because even though he has immense power, like overwhelming power, he is able to balance it off with some heart, you know? It's similar to Superman. Like, what makes Superman so special is the fact that this guy could level the planet, but he prefers to actually, like, conduct conversation with people and see the good in people when he could just slap them down and call it a day, And, we need more of that because right now, you look at the youth, they don't have role models. You could pick and choose and say people like Miss Rachel and Bluey and shit like that, which I don't understand how you would say it was Bluey, but whatever. There's no real role models because right now everything is being hijacked by one agenda, and so anything else that kind of steers away from that is being shat on, or it's not being given an opportunity to kind of give people an example. All men in general are under fire, and we've been under fire for a long time. So masculine men teaching their kids how to do, I mean, we're doing it anyway because fuck what other people want to see. We have a duty and we know what that duty is, so we are going to fulfill that duty. I taught my sons how to fight. I taught them the mindset to have when going into the world and dealing with unreasonable people because they're all over the place. I taught them the importance of protecting their mom and protecting each other and protecting others who cannot protect themselves. I taught them the on the flip side, I taught them if you have a lot, give some of that to someone who has none. We've been doing it for years. You got doubles or triples of a figure, go out and put it in the free pantry so that some kid who doesn't even have one can have one. You know what I mean? Like little things. We put food out there, all that kind of stuff. We do things for charity because there are people out there who don't have shit. It doesn't make sense because, we live in America and we should be able to, everyone have, but that's becoming worse and worse and worse and worse every year. The haves have more and the have-nots have even less. So if you can help offset that, do it Because if we all did it, no one would have not. Um, uh, Kids, right? They show you that when you're a little kid, in this case, little boys and their fathers leave an impression on their kids, on their little boys especially, because little boys innately want to grow up to be like their fathers until something gets in the way to kind of direct them to show them that they don't want to be like their dads. Like in my house, my dad was abusive to my mother. He was abusive to all of us, but he was abusive to my mom, like on multiple occasions. I can't say that in some cases she didn't create the she didn't open the floodgates to have this shit happen, because she just had a mouth on her. Good God. Good God. We just leave. We go walk the dog, try to leave the house. And then when I got older, it got to a point where I felt like I had to stay there to help protect her from him, even though she was in the wrong, which is the fucked up way that we are raised. I should have been thinking protect both from each other, because they're both going to fuck up. But instead, it was like, got to protect mom because she can't fight. Um, but when I was a kid, her and my dad felt like giants. I wanted to be like them. Then as I got older, I realized that I don't want to be like them, because I see all they do is provoke each other. And there was very little of the love that's supposed to be there. And it was replaced with just like contempt. And I was just like, yeah, I don't like that. I don't want that in my life. I don't want to be like that. But when I was a kid, I remember how much I wanted to do. I saw my dad working on planes. You know how cool it is to see a plane engine, the turbines opened up, and see somebody working on that shit? Or to see cars dismantled and then your dad comes and puts it all back together? I thought my dad was a super genius. And strong as fuck too, because I saw him picking up huge parts of like the turbines and things and putting them on. I saw all kinds of stuff when I was a kid. I was like, man, this is dope. Then I grow up and I realize that was a portion. That's his skill set. That's not who he is as a person. Then you learn his ideology, and it's like, holy shit, you have a really fucked up ideology. And you remember I'm nearly 50, and I remember when I saw that at 13. We don't forget this shit. The movie shows you that Adam was spending a lot of time trying to live up to what his dad wanted him to be, and he felt bad because he couldn't do it. But he remembered everything he saw his dad do, and he felt bad that he couldn't live up to what his dad did. And then as soon as he gets the powers, as soon as he gets the opportunity to save his dad, he just is like, yo, I'm going to show everybody what I can do. I'm not concerned with anything else. I'm going to kill everyone and save my dad. And then his dad tells him before he dies that you didn't really have to change. It's just that the world is hard, and I needed to make you tough enough to be able to handle the world. And it is a dope little piece that I think a lot of people missed. So when they say that the movie it's soft and it's gay and blah blah blah, you're missing a lot of points. They also are showing you with dads, a lot of times you have to be tough on your kids, because it'll make your kids, especially boys, grow up to be capable men. If we save them from every hardship, they won't be able to do the things that are necessary to have a family of their own and protect that family of their own. Women especially like men that are capable. Jordan Peterson talked about women liking men that have the capacity to be dangerous. That's why women always go for the bad boy, because the bad boy throws around his capacity for potential dangerousness all the fucking time. And the women buy into it. Oh my God, he could do this. Oh my God, he looks like he could do. Yeah, he looks like it. In most cases, he can't do all that shit. And if he can, in many cases, he's a fucking psychopath. I mean, I'm just being honest. But then there's the men that chicks aren't really like jumping at. And a lot of them are martial artists. They become good cops. They become soldiers. They become, Secret Service people. They become SWAT officers. They become resource officers in our schools. They become like guardian angels and shit on the streets. They do all kinds of shit, and they don't always look like they could do it, you know? So they had tough love that helped make them tougher so that they could actually stand up to the world, because the world is going to beat your ass. Like, if there's one a constant that I see and I have seen in life, is that the world will fuck you up. You know what I mean? It will fuck you up if you're not tough enough to bounce back. So you have to raise your kids, especially your little boys, to be able to stand up to what's going on. You know what I mean? To stand up to these things, to rise to the occasion. Otherwise, they're going to get their asses beat down, and then they're going to become the ones online crying about how difficult everything is because they weren't allowed to fail. This was the problem with the participation trophy generation. The fuck are you? Why are you here if you can't run? Why are you at a track meet if your kid can't run? And why the fuck are we supposed to be cool with that kid getting a participation trophy for showing up to do something that he can't physically do? You know what I mean? Like, tell me you want to set your child up for failure without telling me you want to set your child up for failure. I remember doing martial arts and seeing these smaller classes, and there's kids that are gifted doing complex kicks and shit, and then there's the kid who he's going up against who doesn't take the shit seriously enough to even try. And they're not coordinated, and then they're not strong because they don't do any of the conditioning, and then they get knocked out and turn around and get a participation trophy. The fuck are you talking about? Martial arts is the most honest exchange of things you can have. It's one of the most honest exchanges you can have. You and another person get into a ring, and then you use what you were taught to the best of your ability, and the winner stays standing, the loser is on his ass. You can't blame anybody else as long as nobody snuck in brass knuckles, salt, any of that other shit, knives, anything else. It's just hands, feet, elbows, knees. You know, your forehead, top of your head, whatever. That's it. So if you lose, you lose. Now you got to go back to the coach and be like, yo, coach, you got to help me strengthen the areas that I was weak in and continue to be sharp in the areas I was sharp at. And the winner has to be like, yo, coach, help me stay sharp overall. And one day that guy will still lose, and one day that other person may win. But it's honest. There's no bullshit. It's honest. Yet you want a participation trophy, and no one seemed to be honest about this shit, you know, because what happens when you get out in the real world and mom and dad can't help you? You're going to be wishing for a participation trophy, and they don't give them out in the real world. But we got to teach our kids to be tougher. I made sure to do that with mine. I hope you guys did that with yours. Then the most important one that is different from participation trophies, because this is the fuel for you to persevere and get through it, is that the power is already in you. You have to decide what you want to do. You have to decide if you're going to put the extra in to get more out of whatever it is you're trying to do. If this is a reason why I have an issue with the way they've rolled out generative AI. There's a certain set of skills that you need when it comes to art. And you have to put in a certain amount of time to develop those skills, you know, theoretically. In most cases, many of us, me and many of my colleagues, have put in well over the 10,000 hours. We've put in millions of hours because we've been drawing since we first picked up a fucking pencil or a crayon. So we put in the time. We believed in ourselves enough to force and push through bad critiques and things like that to make sure that we improve enough to get to the point where we could put our work next to our heroes' work, and people could, you know, choose us over them. You know, we look at their stuff and our stuff and we say, okay, I feel like now I'm worthy enough to have my stuff sit alongside these guys. You know? And for many of us, that's the way it works. You hear people say, oh, I could never criticize anybody. You should be able to, because if you could tell what you like, you should be able to speak about what you don't like. Then once you learn what the fundamentals are, what the more advanced details are and techniques are, you should be able to see if that shows, is it reflective in the work that you like? Because if it is, those people really earned your attention. But if it's not, and you're able to do that and they are not, you are surpassing them, you know? And you need to be aware of that because they are the stick. Your heroes often, like whatever work their output is, often is the stick by which you measure your own abilities. You want to be able to do things that they can do, but you need to believe in yourself and have the drive to do that stuff. So the whole concept of He-Man is it's a boys' power fantasy, and the I have the power portion is um, intentional because they wanted the little boys to take ownership of the character when they're playing. Because part of a boy's um, development involves creative play. You have a lot of doofuses and idiots out there to try to tell kids that they're men, but boys, little boys, that they're men before they've even hit puberty. And it's bullshit. While they're little boys, you need to let them think every fucking thing is possible. Everything is possible. And then incrementally, as they get older, that starts to be put into perspective, but they still can feel that, I could do this, the impossible or the seemingly impossible. All those records that have been shattered, at one point they seemed impossible, and somebody was like, yo, I'm going to make sure I do it. I'm going to find a way to do it. And then they do it, and then you find out, oh, it's not that impossible. There's gymnastics moves that were considered impossible 20 years ago. Now they're commonplace because all the trickers out there that do crazy ass, stunts and dance moves, and they take things from capoeira and mix it with XMA and whatnot, and you see the awesome physicality on display. They believed they could do it. And they didn't give up because they believed they could do it. You have that ability, and this is a factor that's intrinsic in the whole Masters of the Universe, like the He-Man side of things. So I think there are a lot of things in the movie that, like what I just described, that people missed. And I think the fact that in this day and age, they made a film that does that, and then it also has overt jokes that could be considered gay, like when they're not even double entendres. They're just straight up fruity lines, like when Skeletor says, with the muscles and glistening muscles and that shiny sword dangling between your what do you say, your glorious thighs. Like, nobody talks like that. It's clearly joke. It's like a joke, but at the same time, it's a gay joke because He-Man, the original He-Man, the filmation He-Man, because of the presentation of the character, the pink shirt and the bob haircut, he became kind of a quote unquote gay symbol. You know what I mean? And then when you watch the show, there's a lot of unintentionally gay stuff in it. The original show, not the 2002 show, not even the New Adventures of He-Man, just the original. I think it wasn't on purpose, but folks are always trying to claim shit, and they were looking for things, and they gave them a lot to find, and it became, symbolic of that group. Fine. So in the film, they found ways to pay homage to those particular things by giving Skeletor and giving some other characters some fruity lines to kind of lean in that direction. And they're doing it kind of tongue in cheek, so somewhat, it's a joke. It's not meant to be taken super seriously. So, it works. So I don't know, man. I overall thought it was a fun movie. I saw it twice. I wanted to make sure that like a lot of the details were fresh in my mind. Like, for instance, here's one that no one spoke about. Daniel Pemberton did the music to. He's one of my favorite composers, but he also did the music for King Arthur: Legend of the Sword. And that soundtrack is, or score, I'm sorry, not the soundtrack, the score itself, the music in the movie designed for the movie is phenomenal. He made a track out of breath. people running. He made another track. It sounds like a hip hop beat, but done with medieval instruments. Um, but the theme to King Arthur, the Excalibur theme, it's fucking it's better than the movie. And there's several versions of it, or technically it's the round table, the Knights of the Round Table, but the Knights of the Round Table theme is the more dramatic version of the essentially Uther Pendragon's scene, his theme, and then it becomes the Excalibur theme. Also, they're all mixed together. Anyway, if you listen to the track "The Power of Excalibur," there are aspects rhythmically, and even if you compare leitmotifs, that are right here in Masters of the Universe. I loved Legend of the Sword. People dissed the shit out of it, but it was like, I also liked the King Arthur from Antoine Fuqua years ago. I didn't think it was like the greatest King Arthur movie, but it was a cool like barbarian sword movie, you know. But the Legend of the Sword essentially undid what Hollywood was trying to do with the earlier King Arthur film with Clive Owen, and it put the magic back into the world of King Arthur. Um, it just was gritty, and it was telling a story from a perspective where it added things that kind of made Arthur more of a man of the people, and not so much this like regal king that was born from royalty and came to claim his birthright and become the king of of all knights or king of kings or whatever. I prefer the more grounded, him as a character being more grounded, and then he's given this supernaturally amazing opportunity, and then he becomes this badass king because of where he came from. But anyway, if you put the music, the song "The Power of Excalibur," it's the music when Arthur show Jesus, when Arthur and Vortigern have their final showdown. And Vortigern is in this weird death dealer form with this big ass scythe. He's muscular. He's got burning eyes and shit like that. He looks awesome. He looks like something out of a Frazetta painting. If you take that track, listen to the Skeletor versus He-Man track. So much of it feels like Skeletor versus He-Man is that other track on steroids. I couldn't believe it as I was listening. I was like, holy shit. It sounds like The Power of Excalibur. The rhythm, everything. I mean, obviously he changed the percussion and things like that, but it sounds so similar. And you hear this often. John Williams does it. Hans Zimmer does it. Um, John Ottman does it. Like they all the greats will borrow from themselves, because especially if it's a film that didn't do well, they'll go back and utilize some of that for a film that might do better, or a film that might get more eyes on it. And it feels like that's what they did here. I love movie music. I really love movies. That's why I'm so hard on them, and that's why I've watched so many. That's why I can compare the way I do, because where you guys see hating, I'm literally telling you that there's 10 movies from 20 years prior to these movies that do some of these things that these some of these hacky writers do better. And you don't want to hear it because you think automatically, because he said something negative, he's a hater. It's not it at all. I go in with an open mind. I love being what's the word? A captive audience. And oftentimes, in being a captive audience, you get to pay close attention. You should, because I don't turn my brain off. You should be able to take in everything that's being said, take in everything that's being shown to you, and you should be able to figure out, is it good, is it bad, does it make sense, did they contradict themselves from scene to scene, or is it pretty consistent? And I have to say, this movie was pretty consistent. Trapjaw, that was like one of the best. It's almost 1-to-1. Beastman was 1-to-1. I mean, they did the generic thing of having him move like an ape, like a large ape, which I guess a lot of characterizations of him have him moving like an ape, so I guess it makes sense. His body shape fits that. Um, I would have had him more man than ape, but that's just me. Triclops 1-to-1, except for the fact that he was brown instead of being, a white or tan, and it doesn't really do anything to the character because it's a planet full of different types of people. Why couldn't he be brown? Same goes for Man at Arms. Doesn't really change the fact he has the glorious mustache. He wore the armor the right way. He was a dope fighter, and he cared for his daughter, even though at one point he let her down. Sounds like shit that's happened to Man at Arms. How many times has he let down Tila when he was overconfident? It's something that happens, especially to warrior types. I don't have any issues with that. So, there's a lot of good in the film. If you're literally a hater, don't bother to go see it. If you didn't like Motu in general, you won't like the movie because it just continues everything from what Motu already is, and it's a lot of deep cut stuff. The three post credit scenes are insane, which shows you just how much they are, you know, invested and how much the team knows about these characters. Um, but if you're not a fan already, I don't think in general you're going to become a fan unless you're looking for a new franchise to get into. Um, I think that it does the franchise itself well because it's so, for the most part, it pulls very deep from the world of Motu, and it, for the most part, does those characters justice. It doesn't treat those characters like they aren't shit. So, I would recommend it if you get the opportunity. Check it out. Um, if you can get it on DVD or Blu-ray, do it because I think that'll be worth it because the movie isn't doing well enough that it's going to stay in theaters much longer. So it makes sense. It makes sense for you to support the film, give it a chance. But it also makes sense that it will be on streaming soon. Maybe it already is, but it makes sense because it's not doing what the numbers that other groups are doing or other films have been doing. So give it a chance. I think those of you who are into this sort of thing, I think you'll dig it. For people who aren't necessarily into comics, but you like the sci-fi comedy type stuff, because the movie is very comedic, I think you'll dig it because it's a little bit different from what's become standard in recent years. So before this video gets too long, I'm gonna cut it here. Get at me in the comments. We can keep chatting about it. Get into the Discord. We can chat about it there. And that's it for me. You guys have been great. Peace outside.